Jag väntar på en tummen upp från bak, sen byter jag till engelska. All right. Welcome to this European Viable Cities Day. This is the fourth consecutive year we welcome you all for this event. And this year we're pleased to be doing it in front of a live audience here in the heart of Stockholm, along with all of you who follow this online from afar. The European Viable Cities Day is a collaboration between the European Commission and Viable Cities, Sweden's largest innovation program. This day is a bridge between Swedish and European efforts towards the mission of climate neutral and sustainable cities by 2030. I'm Per Granqvist and I'm going to be your company for this event, where we're going to focus on the development of Klimatkontrakt 2030, and that's the Swedish Climate City Contract 2030. We're going to start with the formal welcoming speeches from our host at European Commission and Viable Cities. So I'm going to hand over to Annika Wäppling, Korzinek, Deputy Head of the European Commission's representation here in Stockholm, Cecilia, Schelin, Seidegård, Chairperson of Viable Cities, and Anders Wijkman, Deputy Chairperson of Viable Cities. Please join me on stage.
I would like to welcome you all to this Viable Cities Day that we, the European Commission, is very happy to co-organize with the Viable Cities. Also this year, as you said, is the fourth time, so this is becoming a really good habit, I think, that we should keep up. And also the success that we have seen, I mean, starting with, or not starting, but 9 cities last year and 23 now. I mean, it's really fantastic development that we see. And as was mentioned, this autumn, the Commission presented the missions to the EU research program Horizon Europe. And I think you can all take credit that one of the missions is exactly this, 100 climate neutral and smart cities by 2030, or at least 100, I think we should add, because we, of course, hope for many more than 100. Because the objective is to ensure that these cities can act as experimentation and innovation hubs, that you can be inspiration for many more, so that we, in 2050, as we know, this is our goal, to be climate neutral, all of us, then of course also the cities have to be climate neutral by 2050. And as I said, fitting perfectly well into this mission is the climate contract, the Swedish climate contract that we see now the signature of today. And I want to congratulate all the mayors and the cities that you have taken this step and that you are doing this, because this transformation is absolutely vital, and you will serve as an inspiration for many other cities, not only in Sweden, but in the whole of Europe and globally, hopefully. I hope that you take this opportunity to spread the word, but also to learn from each other in this journey that you are embarking on together. So I look forward to an inspirational and interesting Viable Cities Day today. Thank you.
Thank you, Annika. And my name was Cecilia, and I'm the new chairman of Viable Cities. This is my first European Viable Cities Day, so I'm still learning here, and it's very inspirational also for me. But I would like to say then to all of you, welcome to the European Viable Cities Day, organized together with the European Commission in Sweden. Thank you very much for hosting us. We have international guests that are welcome. And we have the national agencies, and they are not only 4 now, they are 5 now. Very important. And as you said, with 23 cities, 23 mayors dedicated to become climate neutral in the year 2030. And especially welcome to the 14 new ones. 23 cities, they are covering 40% of all the citizens in Sweden. 23 cities, very different. There are small ones, there are large ones, but we have to remember there are no limitations. That we should share knowledge and innovation to the whole of Sweden, of course, to the whole of Europe, and to the whole globe, I hope. Yes, there are no limitations. And we all know the importance of this work that we are doing. We are eager to share our commitment to the EU mission on climate-neutral cities, both from Viable Cities, but also from the 5 national agencies present here, and supporting Viable Cities, of course. I hope the local commitment we will experience here today is a nice role model for others. And I hope we will be future partners for the EU's 100 climate neutral cities challenge, of course. So most welcome, all of you.
Okay, thank you, Cecilia. I just want to add a few things. First of all, to emphasize the European dimension of this enterprise. Of course, Viable Cities is a Swedish initiative, now 23 cities, but it would be very limited when it comes both to scope and scale, unless it was seen within the European perspective. I was intimately involved in the climate change policy making at the European level ahead of the 2020 decision, now almost 15 years ago. We thought at the time that that was very ambitious, cutting emissions by 20% to 2020. Now we realize, in retrospect, that we need to do much, much more. And what we were focusing on then was incremental change. You can do that within the present system. Now it's about transformation. And it's something totally different, because we have to look at the system and transform the system. And it's not about greening the present system. I think many people realize this when they start to thinking, but when I listen to some of the politicians, I get the feeling that, no, now we are going to replace 5 million combustion engines with 5 million electric vehicles. How fast can we do it? That's not the task. The task is to try to understand what is an effective mobility system, in particular in cities. And then we need much fewer vehicles, because we can organize and design the cities in a different way. We can expand public transport. We can make it easier to walk and bike. And we can benefit from mobility as a service, just as one example. Because even if we could electrify everything, if we do it without this mindset, the space required for electrification and the materials required will just be impossible. So we have to rethink material consumption and try to understand how we can cater to and meet human needs in a more effective way, and leave space for those countries in the world who still have a very small material footprint and who have to grow in the conventional way. But we have to modify our system and make it much more both effective, efficient, and human. It's a question of how we define quality of life. And quality of life is not only to amass material consumption. It's about a good life. And there I think we have a real challenge. And I hope the city context will be a good one to do this transformation.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. 2 weeks ago, the European Commission launched a call for cities to join the European mission on climate neutral and smart cities. That objective is, as we heard, of the mission to achieve 100 climate neutral and smart European cities by 2030, and to ensure that these cities act as experimentation and innovation hubs to enable all European cities to follow suit by 2050. To tell us more about that mission, we're honored to have Matthew Baldwin with us today. He's the Deputy-General, the Director of the European Directorate for Mobility and Transport, as well as Head of EU Mission Climate Neutral Cities 2030 by and for citizens. Hello, Mr. Baldwin.
Hello to you. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes, we can. We can see you okay.
Good morning. It's wonderful to be able to celebrate with you the work of Viable Cities and European Viable Cities Day. I'm very sorry I'm not with you in Stockholm. I've been smitten by COVID, which meant that I didn't even have a choice because I'm in quarantine, although I'm pleased to say I'm recovering quite well. but I'm very sorry I can't be with you for this very important day and to catch up with so many friends. And I'll try and follow as much of your discussions as I can online. Huge thanks to all our friends in the EU office in Stockholm, to Cecilia and Anders we just heard from, and all of our friends in the Viable Cities Network. You've done an incredible job. I'm triggered by my remarks today, to begin, if I may, with some reference to a wonderful blog post from another mutual friend of all of us, Alan Larson, who was, of course, chairman of the Viable Cities Board until April of this year, and vice chair of the mission board that produced a crucial report for the underpinning of our 100 climate neutral cities mission, which you just mentioned has been launched. Alan has very effectively had a foot in both camps, and to mix my metaphors, he's managed to steer both boats along very, very effectively. And reading Alan's blog this morning reminds me just how far the Viable Cities project has come in just 4 years. And I think really has been the essential test of concept, a proof that this mission that we are all engaged in has already been an extraordinary journey, as Anders has set out, towards a real transformation of the approach in cities. The whole concept of missions as the basis for cities to go about this terrible challenge of climate neutrality, i.e. to use research and innovation mechanisms and methods to provide the firing mechanism, if you like, to implement the big objective, such as climate neutrality, rather than by piecemeal, small-scale projects, is the underlying philosophy behind it. That's the essence of the 5 missions that we've now launched. And for me, it's this inspiring, clear, very concrete goal that we have in our EU mission to have, again, 100 climate neutral cities by 2030, is one of the key benefits of this strategy. If I'm asked on the bus, and I have been asked on the bus, what's this all about? It is crystal clear, and that's not to be underestimated as a key objective, to be able to communicate something very clearly, both to policymakers, but also, of course, to citizens. So this work that you began back in 2017 was then crystallized in 2019 through this incredible work we did together between the EU Mission Board and the ongoing work of the Viable Cities. And I think another benefit that had was that we were able to take on board for example, the need to include the entire value chain, to include all sectors of a city's activities, buildings and transport and energy and wastewater management. And again, in that holistic transformational sense that Anders just mentioned, and the need for the famous one-stop shop, which has now become, in our wording, the mission platform, and is now populated by the Net Zero Cities Consortium, and you'll be hearing more in a moment from Thomas on that, and of course delighted that Viable Cities is part of that. But these concepts have emerged very clearly in the Mission Board report, and I hope you would agree we have run with them in our own internal implementation plan for the city's mission, which was then adopted or blessed by the Commission last summer, and on which basis we now move forward, and more on that in a moment. But I want to underline this word cooperation, and the ongoing cooperation, because it's been so important, if I may take a moment to discuss this idea of the climate city contracts, which of course is going to be a major topic for today's discussion, but I want to say a few words about it. What I call the precursor work that you've been doing, essential precursor work you've been doing in Viable Cities to develop these contracts, is absolutely invaluable, because it shows that the contract can be a very useful delivery mechanism at lots of different levels. At the city level, of course, and vis-a-vis the regional and the national and the European authorities, but also at sub-city level. I saw last week when I was in Gothenburg how there are contracts being produced by different citizens groups. In this case, the elderly, the people in public and indeed private housing, and setting out their contracts in terms of their own commitments to climate neutrality, helping build a sense of ownership, a sense of co-creation, and a real overall responsibility in the city as a whole. So in this sense, I think the climate city contracts can be both a trigger for citizens' engagement and a vehicle for the process and results of that citizens' engagement. As Alan's blog so beautifully explains, they are providing an effective input to city decision-making, and in particular the climate, what we call the climate policy deficit, where we need to accelerate our work in order to get to climate neutrality. For example, the famous building innovation rate. So hard to get this up from 1% towards the 3% that's necessary. Is a great example of how you can identify the climate policy deficit and address it. And last but not least, the contracts in this phase laid the groundwork also for the identification of investment needs for individual cities, which is so important. So I promise not to be too long. It's terrible listening to people online at the best of times. And I want to conclude this part of my remarks by simply paying tribute to everything that you've done in Viable Cities, for the extraordinary work you've done and will keep doing in the Net Zero Cities Consortium. You're driving a real process of change in Swedish cities. You're showing that cities have the capacity to lead in this existential battle we face on climate change and the complex societal challenge that lies ahead in getting to net zero and indeed delivering on the pledge of the Paris Agreement. Which brings me nicely to Glasgow, where I want to say a couple of words, where I was there to do what I call my traveling salesman routine for the city mission, to talk up what we're trying to achieve and to agitate an interest as much as possible amongst all the different cities that were present there. And I left with an extraordinary sense of potential for our mission in the context of the ongoing global negotiations. Firstly, by the sheer number of mayors that were there and their energy and passion to deliver on these objectives. Secondly, I was left with a strong sense that we're discussing this thing at the level of nation states, which of course is absolutely central in the UN system, but it's at the same time a global challenge we have to address. Of course, it's the ultimate global challenge. And we are, in practical terms, going to need to implement that at local level, at subnational level. I came back with the sense that cities are really equipping themselves to lead this process. And I mean that in a literal sense, to go further and faster than the rest of their societies in order to deliver on climate neutrality. And that's really the essence of what we're about in our climate neutral plan. If you look at what we're trying to achieve with the European Green Deal, a 55% reduction by 2030 is a tall order, but it'll be a less tall order if we can have a number of important cities from across the European Union, not just in Sweden, making a real contribution to that big mitigation effort, if you like, putting on their backs a major part of this mitigation effort on behalf of the rest of their societies. So I'm left with the sense that we can be a crucial micro part of the overall macro European Green Deal and really make a big difference thereby. Briefly, where we got to with our processes. So we were launched gloriously in September. We put out in October an information kit and a stimulus, if you like, to city consideration of what is coming up. And we were then, with some extraordinary work on all sides, I have to say, to get it done, we were able to put out the call for expression of interest on the 25th of November. And that call is expressed to all cities to reply to, and it's open until the end of January. We will then sit down, and I think from all indications I'm having, we'll have a very difficult challenge to actually choose around 100 cities to move forward. From that group of 100 cities, our partners in the mission platform under the Net Zero Cities Consortium will begin work on the first group of 25 to 30 cities and start to co-create with these cities the climate city contracts at the European level. And this is where the city will set up its commitment to deliver on the climate neutrality objective by 2030. And this is the moment where in these contracts, we will also set out the implementation, the investment plans that cities will need to implement those contracts. I don't expect the first contracts to be coming off the production line much before the end of next year, And we will also need to implement what I call Mission Platform 2.0, the additional financial support for the mission platform to tackle the next 75 to 80 cities. But as of next spring, I hope we will be taking forward the work. It's very exciting to taking forward that work at the European level to deliver the first group of contracts with, as I said, about 25 to 30 cities. You'll hear more about that in a moment from Thomas and from Julio, who are presenting in the next session. A few words about what we're looking for in that group of 100 cities. It needs to be a diverse group. As Bill Clinton once said about his first cabinet, it needs to look like America. This city mission must look like the European Union. And I've got a rude word or rude phrase I use to describe the cities from the north. It's the usual suspects. And of course, Sweden is front in line of the usual suspects because of all the fantastic work that you've already been doing in your cities to deliver climate neutrality. And I have no doubt that we will, and I'm delighted to hear very positive responses from Swedish cities to joining our mission, to expressing interest at this stage. And I've no doubt we'll have a number of Finnish cities and Danish cities and Dutch cities. But we need also to get cities from the east and the south of the European Union, which is why the precursor work you've been doing is so interesting, because I think it shows the relevance to all cities. And it's very invidious to select individual cities, but I know they wouldn't mind me mentioning it. We've had extremely strong interest from cities like Mannheim, big industrial cities in Germany, from Marseille. I'm not sure many people would have necessarily associated Marseille with being climate neutral by 2030, but the mayor is super ambitious, and they're coming with an ambitious and clear plan. City of You'll hear more from Julio in a moment about the amazing work he's been doing with the Spanish authorities to generate a strong network of support from Spain. Romanian mayors, I had an amazing meeting with the mayor of Cluj-Napoca, and I think are well on the way to getting cities from all corners of the European Union. Indeed, at time of speaking, we have more than 200 cities that have pre-registered in terms of the expression of interest. That doesn't necessarily follow through in the end to 200 necessary applications under the expression of interest, but I think it's a very good sign. And some of the numbers have been extraordinary. In our first webinar, we had 1,500 people joining us. We had an overwhelming response at the launch we did recently at the Committee of the Regions. So the strong interest is there. I think we collectively are touching a nerve, and the cities are determined to lead on this process, but they're also determined to realize, and it comes out so clearly when I look at the viable cities processes, what I call the co-benefits of action against climate change: the air pollution reductions, the reduced congestion, the savings from road death, where of course Sweden is already a great leader, the lower energy bills, the greater energy security that comes, for example, with independent energy grids. But at the same time, and this is my closing remark, because I really want to listen to everything that is going to be said here today by others, we must not underestimate the huge nature of this challenge. It is a massive challenge. It's a massive challenge just to get to climate neutrality. It's a massive challenge in terms of the governance of cities. It's a massive challenge in terms of generating sustained citizens' engagement and involvement. So indeed that we are doing climate neutrality by and with the citizens and not to the citizens, which is, if it ends up being a thing the citizens feel is being done to them, it will not succeed. It cannot succeed. So it's an exciting project. It's the most exciting thing I've ever worked on in the European Commission. I look forward to continuing to work on it with you in the years to come. We have a mountain of work ahead, but if we could replicate the work of the viable cities across the European Union, we'll be well on the way to achieving it. Indeed, looking at your website this morning, I see this is just one of 17 Swedish strategic innovation areas. And so if this is just one of 17, if the other 16 are going anything as well as this, Sweden must be well endowed indeed in terms of strategic innovation. Thank you very much for your attention. I'll do my best to stay plugged in. I'll keep an eye on the chat if there are questions that you would like to address to me specifically. But as I mentioned, Thomas, we're working in a very close harness with in the Net Zero Cities Consortium, and I'm sure he will be able to answer many of your questions on the spot. And with that, I hand back to you. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Baldwin. We are the most fun strategic innovation program. That's what sets us out. We also are glad to see that because we had a conversation a year ago, and we then talked about being worried about the pandemic going to affect the sustainable agenda, getting cities to become climate neutral. And we could now see for ourselves that COVID doesn't seem to affect the work of the European Commission at all. Thank you for that. Moving on, we are now, every year, we celebrate people whose works and thoughts have moved us closer to making cities climate neutral and more viable in a more general sense. And we call them Viable Cities Champions. And it's now time to name and celebrate the champions of 2021. So I'm going to hand over to Ms. Ola Kordas, the Program Director of Viable Cities.
Thank you, Per. Yes, exactly. Every year we are very proud to have Viable Cities Champions. These are the people who contribute and have major contribution towards climate neutrality, transition to climate neutral cities, but also the ones who contribute to development of viable cities. Year 2021 is a year when the mission of 100 climate neutral cities was launched in Europe, and then this is a year when we are mainstreaming and scaling up the methods and tools that we have developed and tested within viable cities in other member states and in Europe. And then I've heard not one time that the experiences of viable cities cannot be replicated otherwise, because Sweden is very special. We are very special in many senses, and this is truth. We are forerunners, but there are two people here who proved that the methods and tools and approaches of viable cities can be replicated, and that what we are doing here would have influence in other European countries, in Europe and globally. So let me introduce two Viable Cities Champions of 2021. This is Julio Lumbreras and Thomas Ozdova. I'll start with you, Julio. So Julio Lumbreras is a professor at Polytechnical University of Madrid. Julio was a member of the mission board that also Matthew Baldwin mentioned, and where Alan Larsson, our former chair, was vice chair. But Julio also is a coordinator of something which is called Cities 2030. This is a viable city, Spain. And Julio's work led to the first climate city contracts on the national level signed in Spain. So this is totally amazing. Julio, we are very proud and honored to have you as Viable Cities Champion. No, sorry. Sorry, no. So no handshake this time, next year. I would stop myself in time. And then Thomas. So Thomas Ozdova. Thomas is a coordinator of Net Zero Cities, the European program that would develop the mission platform or one-stop shop that also Matthew mentioned. You also, Thomas, is leading the work of Climate Kick on clean and healthy cities, which is also the program that we are learning a lot from Viable Cities. So we are very proud and honored, Thomas, to have you as Viable Cities Champion. Thank you.
So we'll get your picture taken. This will be sent to your mother, so please smile. With such distinguished guests in the House, we want to take the opportunity to get your perspective on sort of accelerating climate transition in cities. So I wanted to start with asking you, what's the most important thing you've seen how Swedish cities act that could sort of speed up the transformation to climate neutrality for other European cities, sort of, and for governments and other stakeholders to learn from?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for this award. And you know this song, We Are the Champions, right? So I'm not the champion, we are the champions, right? Because we learned a lot from you, from viable cities, from Sweden. And that's the main thing we learned. We learned that it's very important to sign these climate city contracts. And that's why we signed already 4 contracts with the 4 largest cities in Spain. And this Monday, 4 more cities will sign a new contract. So altogether, the 8 cities are counting out of 8 million people in Spain. Just counting only the cities without the metropolitan area, so just the municipalities, 8 million people. With the metropolitan areas is much larger. And we learned from you, and I think that gave us lots of inspiration and energy to work, and we signed these contracts with, I think the critical thing here is to take responsibility and collaborate, right? And the responsibility of the city is different than the responsibility of the national government, right? And that's why in the contract there is signature from the mayor and also from the government by the vice president of the government. And each of them commit to different things. And cities in Spain commit to climate neutrality with, just signing the contract, but with a roadmap, with a portfolio of transformative projects, because we know that this needs a systemic transformation. And they also commit to start a financial plan to make this happen, to make this real, not just nice words in a paper, right? But the national government in the contract also committed to do a co-governance of the European funds with local authorities. They committed to change the regulation at the national level, and they committed also to incorporate some fiscal incentives. So, for example, any investment that will be done through the mission, they will reduce the fiscality for companies, private companies. So it's a way to take responsibility and work together. And I think that's the aim of the mission, right? To promote a radical collaboration between cities. Between all the stakeholders. And can I, yeah?
Yeah, sure.
and maybe last thing I want to say is that, this is a kind of partnership between Spain and Sweden, which is interesting because it's north and southern country, but we have to work more broadly. And I think we can export this idea to other countries, because from my experience working with cities for many years, this systemic transformation at the scale and speed needed won't occur without national networks. Because now with the mission we have the European level, with the mission we have the local commitment with cities, but we need this interface between cities and the European level, and this will only happen through national networks, because they can work on regulatory issues, cultural problems, citizen engagement, and at a level that it's not possible otherwise. So we need to expand this to other countries in Europe, and I think there are at least some countries like France, Austria, Greece, Italy that knock the door and are willing to replicate this. So I think we have a nice path to continue extrapolating this and scaling up at the European level in the coming months and years.
Thank you. Mr. Ostopa, yes, good save. We like to applaud good things here. You've been busy working with the net zero infrastructure. So what are the things you can see that, from your perspective, Swedish cities do that we could spread across Europe from your context?
Well, it's a great question, and thanks everyone for inviting us here and recognizing the work that many people are doing. We get to stand here, but many of our colleagues and coworkers are still working on this stuff today. So it's great to be here. And I first came to Sweden in 1988. It's 23 years old. So it's great to be back here again and see Stockholm, even though it's brief and a little dark, but it's great to be here. And, I think a couple of things are worth mentioning. One is, as is very evident and clear, the early work around climate city contracts as an idea being pioneered here, and the experience and the learning that has been generated over the past 3 years is invaluable. And every country and every set of cities are going to be different. I'm learning a lot about European cities and what they can do and what they can't do, and I understand Swedish cities have a little bit more ability to act than many other cities in other parts of Europe. And so, but there's still a lot to learn from this experience over the last 3 years. And I think the things that become most evident is this collaborative approach between the city government, the national government, and the stakeholders around them to really work together on a big, hard problem like emission. That's first and foremost. They'll all need to do that, and that's going to be hard in some places, right? In Budapest and Polish cities who are gearing up to respond to the call to the mission, Sarajevo, cities in Romania, we're talking to them and they have lots of questions and they really want to try. And so we can draw lessons from the experiences here over the last 3 years. I think that's critical. And we had a little conversation just earlier over lunch, and a few things are emerging around issues of governance and how we think about governance and democratic processes. And we'll have to roll up our sleeves and work through different ways of helping make decisions. There's no right way to do that, and I think for us, we always try to step back to the mission, which is no one knows how to actually do this yet. If we did, we wouldn't need the mission. So the mission is about carrying these questions forward, not coming out with a bunch of answers. And so we answer those questions together, and I think that's something that's emerging from this process around governance and how we make decisions as citizens and as institutions of government. I think the other piece is and Matthew talks about this a lot, with the goal of the mission is to mobilize not just European investment, but massive private capital to organize itself to support cities in pursuit of this mission. And we know that that's going to be critical, but the private sector won't just do that because the mission exists. Government from the city level to national level and the European level have to work together to create a platform that can more effectively ask private sector capital to come in, solve this problem, and contribute to the financing that's necessary. It's a level of capital mobilization that's really unprecedented. Maybe certainly since the Marshall Plan, if not even more so than that, if we really think about it. And so we have to go into that with our eyes open and not presume that what we have in place now just needs to get bigger. Because as Anders said, we can't just make what we're doing green or climate neutral. That will not deliver the solutions that we need.
Thank you so much. And thank you for being around. We'll see you later as well. Thank you so much. Julia Lamberas and Thomas Ostoba, this year's Viable Cities champions. 1 year ago, history was made when the first Swedish contract was signed by 9 city mayors and the Director-Generals from 4 government agencies. And it's already, as we heard, cascading on a local level as well as on a European level. The Climate City Contract is an agreement between cities, government agencies and viable cities in which all parties commit to making concrete contributions to speed up the climate transition. Though the contract has one part that is the same, the commitments of the government agencies and viable cities. The other part of the contract is related to cities. It looks different because it's been adopted to the various circumstances. They're different in size, they don't have the same geography, industry or political governments. And several of these cities have also added an annex to the contract with more information on how they are working on the climate transition. So the climate contract is a long-term commitment that ensures collaboration between cities and state level. And since there's no clear path forward, we need to test our ways, and the Climate City Contract 2030 will develop over time. It shall be revised every year, both at the local and the national level. So today, 1 year later, Viable Cities is working together with the 23 cities and 5 government agencies to accelerate the climate transition. And we are now at the point where we will sign a revised and more ambitious contract than last year. So welcome on stage, dear mayors and director generals and Viable Cities. So you have to squeeze in on this little mat with the European flag on. And on my signal, you will be signing. And after the signing, you will hold up the contract, and we will have a photographer who can sort of make a memory out of this. So you have to squeeze in here. We will also be joined on the screen by other mayors who are already been signed in advance because they couldn't be here. But you have to squeeze more here, more on the mat. We have this is our photographer. He will help us. Yeah. Even more. So you can see the signing parties on the screen behind. Flytta lite grann. Kom lite här. Anna, du kommer upp runt här. Du kan stå här. Ja. Så, we'll see.
Lite avstånd var det ju egentligen.
Okej, så var vill du stå någonstans? Ja, bra. Ja. So shall we proceed with the signing or have a heads up from the photographer? So you have to squeeze in a bit because you're actually in front of the people who are all signing back there. So everybody can grab their pens and start signing now. And afterwards it will be one of those family portraits we all know from EU sort of high-level meetings. It's also something you can send to your parents if you want to, or your kids.
To send it to the children.
Or grandchildren, depending on how old you are. Yeah.
Grandchildren, yes. Send it to them.
Okay, so should I be raising up? Alla färdiga? Bra. I will switch to Swedish to make it easier. Ni som är framme, ni håller den framför kroppen så här. Ni som är bakom, ni kan också hålla upp så här. Precis. Alla ska bara kunna se fotografen, så kommer det bli toppen.
Håll dem lite högre ni som är längst bak, annars döljer ni varandra.
Ja. Titta, fantastiskt. This is what it looked like when history is made. And the photographer will be... Precis, du kan stå här.
Ni andra där bak. Du som är längst bak, kan inte du komma fram? Perfekt. Så får ni vrida er lite så att ni får plats. Perfekt. Sträck dem lite högre. Mariestad, kom lite närmare. Tryck in dig lite.
Kan inte hålla den framför huvudet på det här.
Nu antar vi att alla är fullvaccinerade.
If you feel silly, this is what all sort of the heads of states will feel when they are at one of the big summits.
Yes.
All right. Är du nöjd? Thank you so much, everybody. We'll make sure this picture gets distributed to all of you. Let's continue with the program. The fact is that none of this paperwork matter if we don't work together and take responsibility for our own actions. So let's take a few minutes to understand where we are. Let's look at the facts. Whereas the Paris Agreement stipulates that our goal is to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius, Sweden is already far beyond that. According to the Swedish Meteorological and Hydrological Institute, SMHI, an expert agency under the Ministry of Environment, the temperature of Sweden is already at 1.7 degrees. The increase is highest at the northern and eastern part of Sweden. Umeå is already at 1.9, Stockholm at 1.8. The smallest increases in Sweden are to be found in Växjö and Helsingborg, and they are still at 1.4 degrees. The Swedish capita emissions Sweden's per capita emissions are around 10 tons, which is very high by international consumption. This is because our consumption patterns are unsustainable, full stop. If you're unsure about your own footprint, have a look at your income statement. The richer you are, the higher cost you inflict on the climate. But the majority of people in Sweden earn enough to be qualified as high-income earners from an international perspective, and the way we consume affects the world. That is why it's important for us to take a step forward. The good news is that sustainable lifestyle is not only possible, it's already here, though it's not possible for everybody yet. At this very moment, tens of thousands of people, tens of thousands of citizens in these cities are already living high-quality, low-emission lives in all of these 23 cities. You wouldn't know this, but this is also a low-emission event. And that is the point. As William Gibson allegedly put it, the future is already here, albeit unevenly distributed. Thus, the roles of mayors and city officials are shifting. It's not about convincing people that change is necessary, but to enable as many citizens as possible to live high-quality lives within planetary boundaries. And climate city contracts have the power to do just that. It provides a North Star that we can all navigate towards, even though our challenges will vary from city to city. And most importantly, we can do that if we're all willing to learn from each other. I'm now going to talk to mayors from cities that are part of viable cities and hear what achievements they are proud of, what insight and initiatives they are ready to share with each other and the rest of Europe. I'm going to do this by calling them in groups and themes. First up are 4 cities that have been engaging citizens in various ways. So I'm now going to be joined on stage by Monica Bubholt from Karlstad, Peter Bok, Enköping, Hans Lindberg, Umeå, and Åsa Wiklund-Lång from Gävle. Welcome. See if we can get Ms. Wiklund-Lång on link. There you are. Hello. I'll start with Ms. Bubholt. In what ways have you engaged citizens in Karlstad in rethinking their consumption patterns that we can learn from?
We have worked with Sharing Towns, a project for some years now, to change the view of how to share goods and services in Karlstad, and to make it more easily to get access to these services and products. So one thing we have worked is to really invite people. We had a map jam, for instance. We needed to find out where can you share stuff, where can you repair stuff, where are there second hands. And when we did this internally in the municipality, we found out like 30 shops or repairs. And when we did it, invite and made a map jam with all different participants, we had like 140, so we didn't know. So invite, let them tell us what's going on and spread the word. And also one thing that I think is good is also to ask for help. Be like participatory attitude. Ask for help when it's possible. Ask, we need a Christmas tree. Does anyone have one? Just to get them involved and share and be part of this change.
Mr. Bok, in Enköping, I know that you reached out to young people to get them engaged in the city planning process, but how do you do that in a strategic way?
We do this throughout collaboration with the city's large upper secondary school. In their study plan, the students in the technology program have set aside time to actively participate and contribute ideas for Enköping to be climate neutral. The initiative to involve young people started together with Viable Cities a few years ago. Several different workshops in the form of design fiction, for instance, have been held in the upper secondary school.
Interesting. Mr. Lindberg, I know that you've been creating a local climate contract with the cities of Umeå. What's the key takeaway from your work that we can all benefit/steal?
I think the key is work with the citizens, not for the citizens. We have to use them. We have to discuss with them in workshops how to be more sustainable. I think our success is the dialogue with the citizens in Umeå, and we have also a digital platform on our website that you could use. You could read there and see what we do, and one of the challenges is the dialogue, but I think we are good at that in Umeå.
I'm sure you are. Ms. Wiklund in Gävle, you've been successful in engaging youth in your program Lärande för hållbar utveckling, Learning for Sustainable Development. What can the rest of us learn from you when it comes to learning?
Well, speaking about citizen engagement, you really need to enable children very, very early. So working with our preschool youngsters and kids is a very successful way. We work with this in our preschools, and one way Mr. Baldwin talked about trigger engagement, and we trigger engagement both to our teachers and our children by, for example, the non-profit organization Keep Sweden Clean, which is not only picking litter, it's about sustainable living. And they have this green flag certification, and when you have this green flag, it means that you work sustainably. So the kids think this is very intriguing to do this, and we have seen that they keep asking their parents, their siblings, their relatives, what do you do to make the world more sustainable? And we have seen that sports organizations and sports clubs by this say, what can we do to be the most sustainable sports club? So this triggers is an inspiration for young kids to we enable them to act more responsibly and for a better environment and climate.
Thank you so much. Thank you all to the cities of Karlstad, Enköping, Umeå and Gävle. It will be me rapid-firing question like this all afternoon in order to get all the sort of essentials from our cities. Making mobility carbon-free and readily available is key to making cities climate neutral. Now, joining me are 3 cities that are working hard on solving this issue in their climate contracts. So I'm joined on stage by Mohamed Demoriak from Linköping, Susanne Wallner from Mariestad, and Emma Feldman of Järfälla is with me on a link, I think. Yes, hey Järfälla. I'll start with you, Mr. Demoriak. If you look at the things you've done in terms of climate smart mobility in Linköping, what are you most proud of? Most proud of
is that we're trying to push the boundaries of mobility, what mobility is, trying to get rid of the notion that you have to use a certain kind of vehicle. Mobility can be anything. It can be different from day to day. And we're trying to make this seamless for our citizens, so you can change from one vehicle to another vehicle without having any problems. We're trying to work with mobility as a service, as you mentioned earlier. We're trying to use new technology as driverless buses in our city today, and we're trying to make it easier for those who want to make a sustainable choice. So we're really trying to push the limits of what mobility can do for a city.
Mrs. Wallner, at the heart of your mobility efforts in Mariestad is your bet on hydrogen. Why did you bet on that?
Because it's a good bet. We have all the other bets too. We have all the other kind of fuels, biogas, HVO and everything, but we are very good at hydrogen in Mariestad, so maybe we could help others. And what I'm most proud of now is that we are scaling it up and connected with what the other champions said here. We are scaling it up to a system scale where we think like it's not only about one thing. You have to think in a system way to reach the higher goals, because it doesn't matter if we go by 11 hydrogen cars in Mariestad. It's not a big effort anymore. We have to reach the higher goals, and so that's what we're working on.
Mrs. Feldman, in terms of mobility, what focus have you chosen for your mobility efforts in Järfälla?
Well, I would say I agree with the first party here, and it's consistent and reliable work when it comes to sustainable mobility. And also, of course, working with mobility as a service, and to make sustainable mobility choices easy. And we have the ability here to work with Barkarbystaden and building a prominent big planning project. And also here the ability, I would say, to at an early stage, come in with public transportation and making these choices for people very easy. At an early stage. We know that it's difficult to change travel patterns at a later time when people already have moved into their apartment buildings. And to be able to do this at an early stage and set these travel patterns is one of our most prominent focus areas.
Thank you so much for sharing Linköping, Mariestad and Järfälla. Next up are two cities that have industrial transformation as a special focus in the climate city contract. That's Borlänge and Göteborg. Joining me on stage is Jan Boman from Borlänge and Axel Josefsson from Göteborg. Hello. Mr. Boman, in Borlänge, the steel industry is changing to produce carbon-neutral steel. And if I understand it correctly, there's more efforts on the way to transform industry in your area.
Yeah, I will say all the industry. I think that the industry today has gone from being a problem in an environment to be the solution. You can see it in many areas, both in the steel plants, but also in using how to use the tree, the wooden material in building houses, in making products, chemical products that you used oil from in the past. So many innovations on the way.
And how are you supporting that in Borlänge?
In many ways, of course, to support the innovation system, but also to be a part to educate the workmanship and have a good dialogue with them, of course.
Mr. Josefsson, in Göteborg, you've been successful in creating a dialogue between the private sector to speed up the industrial transformation, and that's something you've done several times before. What can other cities in Europe learn from the way you handle this?
No, but I think pretty much what's said here before, that the key here is actually to help our companies to develop the product and services. I think that is the driver for them to be part of this, and we have done that in several cases, and we do that together with academic. As you know, we have a big transport sector. We are now also focusing on the petrochemical industry to see what we can do there. So I think the industry is key here if we want to be able to succeed with this, and then we need to help and support them develop their product and services. That I think is the way forward.
And how is important is engaging other stakeholders to bring into this?
Extremely important, because we can't. They can't do it alone, and we can't do it alone. I think we have seen, for example, we had electric buses in Gothenburg for some years back, where we were first out. It's a new product, a new service. You don't really know us from an industry what is possible and what will work, and then you need the municipalities or the cities to collaborate, and I think that is key to manage this.
Thank you so much for sharing. Borlänge and Göteborg. Another important transformation is the electrification of society, something Örebro, Stockholm and Lund all have things to say about. I'm now joined by Jan Johansson, Örebro, Anna König-Hjelmer, Stockholm, and Philip Sandberg, Lund, on the link. If Philip is there. We have internet in Lund today. Probably not. I can hear him, but see if I can get him on screen as well. I'll start with you, Mr. Johansson. Lately, the new neighborhood Tamarinden in Örebro is an example that's been held up as a role model for other cities. What's being done there in terms of electrification and energy uses that other cities in Europe can learn from?
Well, I think that the big innovation is the sharing of energy between the houses in Tamarinden. Tamarinden is a new city district in Örebro with about 600 housing units, and the innovation here is that they will not only produce and store energy, but also share energy between the houses. So when one house, for instance, has an overcapacity, it will be able to share to another house with a shortage. And it will also be able to store heat and predict when, for instance, we have a cold snap, so that the one house can store the energy and use it in the different houses. And the big thing here, of course, is that it can also support Svenska kraftnät, our general transmitter, so we don't need to use energy from the main grid, but use it in our district itself.
It sounds almost like sort of plants in the woods. They communicate with each other and they have these roots.
Yeah, almost. But I guess this is a little bit more high definition.
Mrs. Koenig-Elmer, early this year you signed what's known as the Electrification Pact with the private sector in Stockholm. Do tell us all about it and what you think could be learned from that.
Yeah, of course, out of our perspective, we have a goal that we will be emission-free from transport. If you look for the city of Stockholm, we have two main reasons for the CO2 emissions. It's traffic and then it's the construction site. And of course, we have to electrify the transport and we have to share to see mobility as a service. So we have an agreement together with businesses as Volvo, Scania and Ellevue and other grid companies to electrify all transport. And we will finance all public charging infrastructure for that for 2030. And in all our procurements after 2030, we will demand that we will have electrified cars. But then, of course, it's also more public values for this. You can have logistic and heavy transport during the nights because it's no noise pollution. And then suddenly we don't have congestions during rush hours. So it's a lot of benefits if you electrify transport in the cities. Today we're not able to build everywhere because of the noise pollution. When the traffic is electrified, we can also build in new places, will bring new houses for young people and so on. So we will have a lot of public values through the electrification. But of course we have to see also sharing economy and the circular system as valuable and be proactive in that perspective as well.
Mr. Sandberg, electrification is also a big thing in Lund. What initiatives that you've done do you suggest other cities should pay special attention to?
Yeah, that's right. Innovation and research are important parts of the identity of the city of Lund. We have a long tradition of cooperation with Lund University, with the research institutes and innovative companies. Let me give two examples because as a city we're supporting innovation in many different ways. One of the most important is to open up the city as a test bed for innovations. And the world's largest low temperature district heating system is built in Lund. Residual heat from the research facilities, ESS and Max 4, is used to heat the city. And the project was recently awarded the Global District Energy Climate Award for Innovation in District Heating. Another example is the Ellen Road unique charging solution for electrical vehicles that is tested and demonstrated in Lund. And in addition, we are using proven technology for the sustainable future. For example, the new tram line that was opened 1 year ago that is running between the central station, one of Sweden's biggest central stations, and the research facilities ESS, connecting the growing city using climate neutral transportation.
Thank you so much for sharing Örebro, Stockholm and Lund. There are indeed lots of ideas to be shared in Sweden or to be stolen from Sweden if you're watching this. And it sort of also makes me proud to see how many things that are being done in all our cities. Electrification isn't, of course, the only answer to going climate neutral. Quite a few of our cities are also betting on biogas, among them Kalmar, Kristianstad and Östersund. So I'm now joined by Anna Tore from Kalmar, and also joining me on link is Peter Johansson from Kristianstad and Kerstin Arnemo i Östersund. See if they got electricity, if we can see them. I'll talk with you instead. I know that Kalmar is almost self-sufficient on biogas, right? So what of your work to get there are you most proud of? that we other can sort of be inspired by?
We have a lot of agriculture in Kalmar, a lot of rural areas with a lot of food production. So we have this great resource, manure, and we collect that. We help the farmers to collect it and start biogas plants. This means that we have like 3 biogas plants already supporting all of our transports. If we have a lot of biogas, we also have a lot of biogas stations, which makes it easier to people to travel by biogas cars.
What made you sort of dare to bet on biogas? Because there's a lot of things that you start from scratch and then you start to do things and you have to put the biogas stations and everything. Well, sort of what made you say, yes, this should be our contribution?
Quite easy to support our local farmers instead of Putin as a politician. And we see a triple winning in this project. We have the support for the farmers, we have the climate, of course, and also we have the coast. When we use this manure and take the gas out of it, then we put it back to the fields. And then the manure is blessed with superpowers, so they will enhance the plant growth, which in turn will lead to that there will be less eutrophication. We will not have the nitrogen and the phosphorus leaking out to the water, staying on the fields. So triple win.
Triple win. Mr. Johansson, in Kristianstad, I know that you were with us just momentarily. I know they've been early that you've been early also to bet on biogas and create what can seen as a smart sewer system in order to harness even more gas. What are you most proud of in all the work you've done? I think you are on mute.
So something very important for us in Kristianstad is the biogas. We were actually early in with biogas productions in Kristianstad. Our local products plant has been running since 1990. And development actually began with a problem we had. As in the case with most innovations, agriculture and food productions is the key sectors in Kristianstad. And the problem was related with a large amount of waste coming from these sectors. With time we release the waste productions could be valued resources and production, clean energy, which is biogas. By producing biogas, we now could replace petrol and diesel in the cars and buses. So today, our 86,000 inhabitants can fuel the cars with public gas station. Our public transportation, school buses, garbage trucks run locally produced biogas, and so most of the municipality cars. Our biogas production in Kristianstad save more than 10,000 carbon dioxide emissions every year. So that was I proud about.
Thank you for sharing. Mrs. Arnemo in Östersund, you've also been betting big on biogas. Could you share one example of what you're doing that we could get inspired by?
I wouldn't say that we are so fast in biogas. We have recently just made a decision about biogas, but we have municipality-owned energy company, Jämtkraft, that is a strong key to get possibilities to get from black to green energy. We have vast areas and we have enough competence to be innovative. So I think our best way to perform is that we have black belt in problem solving between enterprises and the municipality. We are quick movers. And we started in 2011 with a fast charging station, and that was first in Northern Europe. And we have moved, we have buses, we have a lot of charging stations, and now recently we have started a project about Green Flyway, that is a test bed for electric air vehicles. It's both airplanes and drones. And just for some months ago, we had a distance record about 12.5 Swedish miles for a drone. And that enables a lot of development. We have to go from cars to another sort of moving us around when we have vast areas, because we are one of the largest region in Sweden. And as the last thing I would like to say is that Jämtkraft had Northern Europe's largest outtake. It's about 500 megawatt, and this enables us to continue to change from black to green in large scale. We are now working with fuel for aircrafts, for example.
Thank you so much for sharing, Kalmar, Kristianstad and Östersund. An important step to minimizing carbon emissions is to rethink city planning from a circular perspective and make easy to repair, reuse and recycle. These factors are something that Eskilstuna, Nacka, Skellefteå and Växjö are putting emphasis on in their contracts. So we're now going to talk to Jimmy Jansson from Eskilstuna, Mats Gerdau from Nacka, Evelina Falesson, Skellefteå and Anna Tenje Zoom here. You can get them here. They are, that's the way you are. Good. Let's start with you, Mr. Johnson. In Eskilstuna, there's a number of things going on in terms of sort of becoming circular. Could you share one of those that you think others should benefit from?
One or two I could share. I think we're working hard with trying to find and prove that this area can be also economical, sustainable. Two examples, Retuna, our, by this way, world-famous mall, where things that you usually throw in the container, you know, and never think about it anymore. In Eskilstuna, you put it in place, and then you have companies who take care of these things. They repair them if that's needed, and then they sell it again, and gives it new life. So we have a functioning market when it comes to recycling. The other example is our optical waste managing system. In my villa where I live, we have 7 fractions where you put your food in the green bag, of course, and then you can use that in the buses which are not electrical. The others are electrical, and then you have the papers in one bag and so on. And that's completely normal, and any city could do it.
Excellent. Yeah. Mr. Gerdau, in Nacka, you've been working with a new city planning concept where nature meets the city. What could other European cities learn from you in Nacka?
Yes, that's true. Nacka is a fast-growing municipality, and we are now creating our new city center, as you can see right behind me, I think. This is a unique opportunity for us because we can do it in a very sustainable way and really contribute to the climate transformation. A city district in Nacka is emerging in which the nature and the urban qualities are meeting in new ways. We call it a naturban district, nature, urban, naturban. We just invented the word. I don't know if you have it in English yet, but it's a fusion of the best. We do not see the green and the city as opposites, but qualities that strengthen each other. The nature and the existing topography can occupy more space and impact both the physical and social environments. And the metro is also being extended to this area, which is by far our largest investment in climate smart and sustainable future for our generation and for, well, generations to come. So the Central Nacka Development Project with the Naturban concept as its core provides an arena that facilitates collaboration between construction stakeholders, the business community, and of course the municipality to hurry up the climate transformation. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Falesson in Skellefteå recently gained a lot of attention with the cultural center Sara. And in what ways is that sort of a good example of your approach to sustainable city planning and construction?
Well, as you were saying, a lot of things is happening here in Skellefteå right now, and And one of the focus areas for us is building sustainable buildings. And the Sara Culture Center is one of the most focusing things. And for us, it's a 20-story building, totally built in wood. And the focus for us has been to create new knowledge and new experience in this project. And it's, of course, it has been a challenge, but it also shows that as a municipality, we can be brave to create these kind of new ideas and new innovative things. But I also want to say that in all of these things happening in Skellefteå, we need to have a holistic things about the urban planning and focus from the small children to the elderly inhabitants. And so we also focus in our preschools on the whole perspective of energy consumption, for example, because our children needs to grow up in a sustainable organization and also a sustainable society.
Thank you so much. Mrs. Tenje, Växjö is literally located in the middle of the vast forest of Småland, and I know that has been inspired you when it comes to sustainable city planning. So what can we take away from Växjö?
I think that Växjö is actually one of the first modern cities, wooden cities in Europe. So we have wood construction in our DNA here. We have some help during the years. We have good companies in our backs, but we have actually a wooden construction strategy that helps the municipal organization to move faster and further towards climate neutral constructions. And as you know, Växjö is growing, it's quite attractive. So that means that a lot of schools, a lot of preschools, and a lot of elderly homes here in Växjö are built in wooden construction. But the wooden construction strategy also inspires and helps a lot of other builders when they perform the buildings constructions for other companies, so to say. So we have each year also a competition between buildings that has been built during the year, and there are a lot of people who want to be in that competition. So we have also shown that when it comes to sustainable buildings, a strong collaboration between the university and the municipality and the business together with brave politicians that have had set high goals during the years are really a winning concept when it comes to sustainable buildings and energy efficiency, and also when it comes to the whole construction site. So I think we have had come quite far when it comes to this area in Växjö.
Thank you so much, Växjö and Skellefteå, Nacka and Eskilstuna. In addition to the climate city contract, some of the cities have created local contracts. Among them are Uppsala, Malmö and Helsingborg. I'm now joined by Erik Pelling, Uppsala, Simon Krisander, Malmö and Johan Westerlund from Helsingborg. Welcome on stage, guys. I'll start with you, Mr. Pelling. Uppsala, you've been using a form of climate city contract known as the Uppsala Climate Protocol for almost a decade. What results have you gained?
Well, a lot of good results. We realized that we as municipality, we couldn't achieve this by ourselves. And the citizens of Uppsala shouldn't and cannot achieve this by themselves. It's a task that we have to attack as a society. And then we need to cooperate with the big two universities of Uppsala, with the region of Uppsala, with the county, what you call Länsstyrelsen, but most of all with the companies of Uppsala, with the big employers of Uppsala. And that's what we have been doing now for more than 10 years, and it has worked very well, and I can warmly recommend other cities to copy that model, because I mean every city of Sweden has the same challenge. They can't achieve this by themselves. They need to cooperate with others. But together, as a society, we can achieve a lot and faster than otherwise.
And have you seen your emissions drop then?
Yes, by 27% since 2017, but we need to increase the speed now. Since 1990, it's been 2-3% every year. Now it has been, we need to reduce by 13 to 14% every year until 2030.
Mr. Chrysander, in September you signed local climate contracts in Malmö that are similar to those in Uppsala but with a different timeline. What have you learned in that process that you can share with others?
Well, Mr. Gronqvist, I think we've learned maybe 2 or 3 things. First of all, I think we got clear proof that there's a big drive of willingness in the business community and maybe across the whole community to really make strides and go forward in their environmental work. We invited CEOs and so forth with very short notice, and they cleared the calendars and showed up in their Sunday best. So there is a big drive and willingness, I would say. Secondly, I think there's a demand for wide collaboration and to really pin down the commitments together to really know what you're striving for and really to be able to communicate those. And we have some good examples in Malmö where we have a waste company, a transportation company, and a real estate company working together to lower the emissions from heavy transport in the city center. Thirdly, I would say maybe not a learning, but a conviction, and that's really that all of society needs to be on board with this. We need the public, the private sector, we need academia, we need civil society, and the citizens. If they're not on board, we're not going to meet our ambitious goals.
Mr. Westerlund, what do you expect from creating a local climate city contract in Helsingborg?
That's a big question. We have a lot of high-set goals in Helsingborg right now when it comes to climate, and we hope that we can get the companies and the organizations with us in that way. And in Helsingborg we also have one citizen agreement for climate, where the citizen as a grassroots movement actually created an own agreement for climate. So we hope that we right now have 2 agreements in Helsingborg, both for citizens and for companies and organizations that can help us to get further in this process and to make a green city.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing Uppsala, Malmö and Helsingborg. Let's now look ahead from a national perspective. I'm now joined by a quintet of interesting people. That's Robert Andrén, the Director-General at the Swedish Energy Agency, Ingrid Pettersson, Director-General at Formas, a government research council for sustainable development, Gunilla Nordlöf, Director-General at the Swedish Agency for Economic and Regional Growth, Maria Johansson, Head of the Department of Societal Development at Vinnova, and Sven Hudhammar, Executive Director at the Swedish Transport Administration. Lot of Swedish here. Do join me. Okay, so this year we've seen on many occasions of extreme weather around the world and also in Sweden. We've also seen a blizzard of reports underscoring the importance of action now, and the most important one might be the IPCC report. We also know that we mentioned before that the temperature in Sweden already has passed the 1.5 degrees goal stipulated in the Paris Agreement. So, in other words, 2022 needs to be a year of action, of more substantial and more long-term investments, and I know you agree with me because you all signed the Climate City contract. So my question to all of you is what your priorities are for the next year. What are you putting focus on to make sure we get action now and learn quicker? I'll start with you.
Well, thank you, Per. I think it's a short list what we are going to do next year. But besides deepening our collaboration when it comes to engaging, equipping, empowering local communities to become climate neutral, we will also finance with 60 million euros a number of centers of competence, which is a collaboration, strategic long-term collaborations between academia and the private sector in key areas for the clean energy transition. We will increase our financing of projects on the demonstration and testbed level, on focusing on innovations that changes the systems. We will take new initiatives when it comes to matchmaking, because we need more private capital put into there. So we need arenas where investors, innovators and entrepreneurs are meeting, and then you have a marriage, hopefully. We will adopt the second generation of our strategic innovation programs, Vinnova, Formas, and Tillväxtverket. We will continue to finance transformative industrial projects in hard-to-abate sectors. And we will increase our work when it comes to projects focusing on sustainable business models, as well as the social and economic aspects of the clean energy transition. Because we need acceptance in moving forward, even regardless if it's a small step or a huge leap in a way. And then we will review our own international work following Glasgow, and also the launching of these huge packages we are seeing of green deals around the world. So we can export our solutions, our company's solutions and innovations in a much, much smarter way than we've done so far.
Seems you're going to have a busy year. That's good to hear. Yeah. Ms. Pettersson for Formas.
Thank you. We will concentrate on 4 areas: climate, sustainable communities, food and agriculture, and also seas and water. And we also have to see how they are linked together to have a full hand and to do it in a systematic approach. We will also launch, I hope, the second generation of the strategic innovation programs together. We will try to develop our role as a knowledge broker to create a platform where those who create the new results meet those who need it. I hope we will have a great presence globally, because all the questions we are working with, they are global, and we have to be out there to listen, but also to communicate what we are doing, to have a good dialogue. And finally, I would say that we have to deepen our collaboration between the agencies, but also with all the municipalities, with the local areas in Sweden. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Nordlöf, you're the Director-General of the Swedish Agency for Economic and Regional Growth. What's your to-do list?
Why, thank you, Per. You already heard some of it. My colleagues told me what to do. And that's part of how we're working, actually. We are collaborating and have a close network together, which I'm very proud of. And let me also say I'm very proud of being part of this team. The climate neutrality is simply a goal that we have to reach, and we can only reach it by working together. And these cities are front runners and will be very important for the transition in Sweden, but also as inspiration for on the European and global level. From my point of view, the collaborations, the synchronizations with my colleagues is extremely important and what I focus on. And for the National Agency for Economic and Regional Growth, we manage EU funds in Sweden, the Just Transition Fund, and also the European Regional Development Fund. And some of that funding will be financing projects with the goal sustainable cities. And we have actually designed a program, a proposal for a program together with some of these colleagues that are with me here today.
Good to hear. Ms. Johansson at Vinnova, what's your to-do list?
Oh, it's a long to-do list. Some of them was mentioned here before. But first of all, we're very glad that the Transportation Ministry is going to join us in this climate contract. We're very happy about that, because the transportation is so important in this to reach the climate neutrality. So that's one thing. But there's a lot of things we want to do. We want to work more with the new European Bauhaus, for example, and we also, because we think that that's a thing to reach the citizens more, and we also need to have this gestalting to do some good how everything is going to look. But we also have a big industrial expansion in the north of Sweden, and we're going to work together with all these as well. But we see that, and also with viable cities, since a lot of things is really going to happen there, and we think that maybe we have to do some demonstrations over there. But the last thing is that we also need to support the emission for climate neutral cities, of course, and then continue the work we have already started together.
Thank you, Mr. Hunhammer. It's not Easy task you have. You're the last out here. What's your priorities for next year at the Swedish Transport Administration? A lot of good things have been said already. You cannot say them.
That was a hard one. Well, thank you. I was just saying that we're not just new cities. We are also a new signature of this cooperation. I think that's very good. And the take-home message is a holistic view and a transforming change, not incremental change. And these are very big words, and we really have to make them concrete. What does it really mean? And obviously the transport sector is, on this holistic view, a very important sector. And sometimes people think that the Trafikverket forms the transport sector. We obviously don't, and we do it in cooperation with lots of municipalities. So I think this will form a new platform for us to cooperate with. We've had others, but this is a new one. I think we have to explore that. What we'll do concretely, well, we just suggested the government a new 12-year plan a week ago that will be decided next year. Part of that will be the Stadsmiljöavtal, which is obviously an important part of our cooperation here. But there is also a lot of other things, and not just in transport, because Trafikverket, we are a huge public procurement agency, and so are you. So we do have some cooperation with the biggest cities in Sweden, but that could be certainly expanded to more cities. So there's a lot of connections, not only in transport sector, for us to work with.
Thank you so much. Off to work. And now I'm going to hand back to our host for some final remarks. We are slightly ahead of the time because we have again heard a lot of good perspectives, and people have been short and snappy, and we do appreciate that. So I'm going to ask Mrs. Annika Wäppling, Korzinek, Deputy Head of the European Commission's representation in Sweden, to join me on stage together with Cecilia, Schelin, Seidegård, and Anders Wijkman, Chairperson and Deputy Chairperson at Viable Cities. Do join me. See if you got your mics on. Sorry for this surprise.
Ställer dig i mitten där.
Va?
Ställer dig i mitten.
Precis. Ja, ska du börja?
Jag kan börja, absolut. Well, we speak English, right?
Exactly.
No, it has been a really interesting day. I thank you all for all the contributions. I will not speak for long. I just have taken some key words during the day that I think summarizes a bit what we have been talking about. I think that the word that has been coming up almost most is the word challenge. So I suppose this is a big challenge, but one that you seem to be affronting with a good mood. The other word that has come up a lot is transformation, and I think this is important to keep in mind, and it was mentioned just in the last panel, not to look at this as incremental change, but actually as transformation, and then it, of course, neatly links to the word challenge. Another word that has come up a lot is governance, the need for governance, and that's, I think, why it's so important with these contracts, because this is what you all stand for. You stand for the governments. And that links also to the next word, which is acceptance and citizens' participation. Because to have that, I think you need the governance, and you kind of need to build from bottom up and top down, and try to meet somewhere there in between. And finally, enthusiasm. I think there has been a lot of enthusiasm here today, which I think is also needed if this is going to be a success, which I'm sure it will be. So your enthusiasm is well received, and it's really well noted as well. So thank you all for all the great things that you have shared with us today, and that we can bring with you, and the Viable City can bring into the system. And also, of course, a great thank you to Viable City that you have organized this day, and that you have again brought all these cities together. I think this is a great opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm not sure why I asked you to start, because you stole all. You took all the words I've written down as well. But, let's try. First of all, we realize here that 23 cities or 100 cities in Europe, it's we all need to participate in this. So I'm not sure how we should do it, but collaboration and sharing will be the clue here for the future, I think, and piggybacking all the time. It's also very important for all the mayors who participate here and all the politicians that this won't happen by itself. There will be criticism. There will be questions. So you need to be courageous to be able to transform. That, I think, is very, very important. I think you, Anders, said something about greenwashing, and we should not only think about changing all the vehicles we have today to electrified vehicles. We should think it and transform mobility in other ways. So that I think it's very important for you in the cities to think about how could you really change everything and transform it to a more sustainable world. I think the expansion in northern Sweden, I would like to touch upon that once again, because I think we have an important role model that we could look upon. What could we really do in northern Sweden that is different from what we have been doing before? So it's very important, I think. I think also I realized that viable cities are inspiring the agencies to collaborate more, and we discussed the government and how it's so easy to work in silos between the different departments. But you have really the opportunity to make sure that we are collaborating in Sweden in a nice way. I think I stop there to leave something for you, Anders.
Okay. Thank you. It was a very nice walk through different areas. One of the question marks I have is where will all the investments come from? And that's going to be a real challenge. We had a little discussion over lunch where I believe Indy said when we talk about hundreds of millions, that's peanuts in this context. I think he even compared it, and you did, Thomas, you even compared it with the Marshall aid after the Second World War. It's a huge undertaking. So I think next conference we would have to talk a little bit more about investments and the blending of private and public sector investments. Secondly, when we talk about innovation, we mostly think about technology. And of course, that's very important. But innovation is also about governance and how we organize ourselves. And I would like to hear more about that, because it is a challenge in a society that is very silo-based in its structure. And again, at luncheon, when we were a smaller group, somebody said that the government office is probably one of the most conservative when it comes to thinking about how to organize itself to meet these challenges. So that's also an issue. Then to bring in people and to include the citizens, I think that's going to be crucially important. And I'm afraid that the present debate we have now about energy and energy prices and the perceptions about what the causes are for the energy crisis, unless we can have some clear answers to that in the near future, I think some of this climate change transformation is going to be more difficult, because people are going to refer to the need to transform, leading to higher prices, higher costs, and we have to be crystal clear in explaining what the hell is going on, and that there are no simple solutions, and there are no simple explanations either. Two more things. We haven't talked about the urban-rural connection, but of course it's critically important. Viable cities is about cities, but think about all the people living in the rural areas and the fact that we have to bring them with us as well. And that will require a lot of careful thinking. And some of the cities involved in the viable cities context do have some rural areas within the city context, and I think we should really talk to them about that. So the food sector and also to some extent the forestry sector comes into the picture. Finally, and this is really my hobby horse presently, materials. The material footprint in a city like Stockholm for each citizen is around 27 tons. And then we include minerals, metals, fossil fuels, and biomass. That's the way it's calculated. The footprint of an African south of Sahara is 2 tons. Do you think we can bring prosperity to everybody in the world by just continuing at the level where we are? If we are going to bring 3-4 billion people in the south, primarily, from 2-3 tons up to at least 8-10 tons, which will be required to enable them a decent standard of living. We can't continue to be on 27 or even increase. We have to do things in a smarter way. And I think that perspective has to guide us all the time. And that's why smart, intelligent solutions is going to be so important. And I think we've heard some examples of that today, which is encouraging. So let's work hard, and next year we will have even more good examples.
Anders, may I challenge you on one thing? It's on. I think the last thing you brought up was very good that you brought up. But when it comes to investments, I'm not so worried. I don't think you can compare it with Marshall help. I mean, Europe was in ruins at that time point. Today, there is so much money out there and so many people that worries about how they can invest it in a smart way. So I think if we all could interest people in putting their money into important things like sustainability and climate smart things.
I agree with you. There is a lot of money out there.
Yeah. And they want to make more money.
Yeah, but I don't know whom you met in the finance sector, but I'm sorry to say that the people that I have met mostly have pretty different requirements for return on investment as compared to the long-term sustainability investment that we are interested in. They want 15-20% in the short term. That's another economy. I'm sorry. Exactly. So we have to transform the finance sector. So that's a good topic for the next year.
And pointing at me, it's all of us that's going to do this.
You are the master of ceremony here.
Thank you so much for your reflections.
It's Olga that we should.
And with this, we say goodbye from Stockholm today. Thank you so much for watching.